Cabinet meeting, and also welcome anybody that is watching online. Before the meeting starts, I'd like to invite the committee member and scrutiny officer to take attendance of officers attending virtually and to explain how proceedings will work.
Good evening. Can I confirm the following officers joining remotely can hear us and that we can hear them? Chris Jeffrey.
Good evening, present.
Good evening. Anne Banner.
Good evening, present.
Good evening. Martin Lawrence.
Good evening, present.
Good evening. And Louise Symes.
Good evening, present.
Good evening. And finally, Nigel Smith.
Good evening, present.
Good evening. Are there any other officers in attendance remotely tonight that I haven't called out? If a member wishes to speak, they should use the speak button located on the microphone unit. The microphone will light up green and the chair will be alerted of your request to speak. When the chair invites you to speak, your microphone will be made live and will turn red, at which point you can speak. When requested to vote, voting will be via the yes, no, abstain buttons on your microphone unit. Details of how members voted will be shown on the screens around the room and the results will be visible on the YouTube stream. Are there any questions? I will now hand back to the chair.
Thank you very much. I've received apologies from Councillor Tamsin Thomas. Are there any further apologies? I can see that there aren't. Item 2, the minutes of the 23rd of September 2025. I'd like to propose that we take as read and approve as a true record the minutes of the meeting of Cabinet held on the 23rd of September 2025. May I have a seconder, please? Councillor Val Bryant.
Second.
Thank you. Any comments? No. Okay, may we go to the vote, please?
Thank you, Chair. That motion is carried.
Chair's announcements. In accordance with Council policy, this meeting will be recorded. The recordings will both be available on the Council's YouTube channel as well as the Council's ModGov site alongside the documents from this meeting. Members are reminded that this Council has declared both a climate emergency and an ecological emergency. These are serious decisions and mean that as this is an emergency, all of us, officers and members, have that in mind as we carry out our various roles. For the benefit of our district, more details are included on the agenda front sheet. Members are reminded to make declarations of interest before an item. The detailed reminder about this and speaking rights is set out under the Chair's announcements on the agenda. For the purpose of clarification, 4.8.23a of the Constitution does not apply to this meeting, therefore a member may leave the room during the debate and consideration of the item and be able to vote. However, please be mindful that the business of the agenda and wherever possible leave at an appropriate point in the proceedings. I've agreed to change the order of the published agenda and item 8 will now take place following item 11. Public participation. We're joined this evening by Councillor Ralph Muntzer, who'll be providing a 3-minute presentation for members during item 8, local government reorganisation in Hertfordshire. Item 6, items referred from other committees. 6A, Overview and Scrutiny Committee. The draft North Hertfordshire Town Centre Strategy will be considered with item 9. 6B, Finance Audit and Risk Committee, Procurement Strategy 25-28 to be considered with item 10. And 6C, Finance Audit and Risk Committee, Medium-Term Financial Strategy to be considered with item 11. So we're going to item 7 now. This is the updated 3Cs policy. This is on your agenda pages 19 to 54. Councillor Val Bryant to present, please.
Thank you. The latest version of the 3Cs policy was approved by the Cabinet at the end of 2022. The policy was due for review in September 2025. In February 2024, the Local Government Ombudsman introduced their Complaint Handling Code, which is Appendix C, which was first trialled with a number of pilot councils to evaluate how the code works in practice and to shape further guidance for the sector. The Complaint Handling Code aims to provide guidance about good administrative practice to organisations under Section 23 of the Local Government Act 1974. As such, the LGO may make a finding of maladministration where local council's policies and procedures depart from the code without sufficient explanation. The Council's 3Cs policy has now been updated to be compliant with the code, alongside supporting internal documentation ahead of the April 2026 deadline. Appendix B outlines the additions to the policy as shown. The updates do not fundamentally change our approach. They are simply ensuring that things are as clear as possible for residents and staff and that we align with the code. As outlined in the report, there is one part of the code that we will not be adopting. The code states that individuals do not have to explain their reasons for wanting to escalate a complaint to stage 2 of the process. Simply, they can remain unhappy. The Council does not take this approach, and the 3 criteria put in place a number of years ago so that customer services are able to undertake a considered review and ensure service areas are not overwhelmed with escalated complaints when they already answered the original complaint. The recommendation is that the Cabinet approve the changes to the policy. If you do so, our next steps will be to brief staff on the relevant changes and republish the policy on the Council's website. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Val. May I ask, do we have any questions? No, the 3C seems to be quite stated. You've made the proposal. May I have a seconder, please? Councillor Debenham?
Yeah, happy to second.
Thank you very much. Debate. Would anyone like to add anything? No, 3Cs goes through quite simply. May we go to the vote, please, Susan?
Chair, that motion is carried.
Thank you very much. One that I think will probably have a little more debate. The draft North Hertfordshire Town Centre strategy. Can I invite Councillor Claire Winchester, the Chair of Overview and Scrutiny, to present the referral on this item, please?
Thank you, Chair. Very happy to be here. Yes, we appreciated the opportunity to scrutinise this very important document. Glad we've had the chance to see it at this consultation phase. And I think I summarised during the meeting to say that this document, we really appreciate that it's not necessarily for a lay audience, that the people who are likely to be consulted for it are likely to know exactly what it's for and recognise the considerable work that's gone into it. But we felt as a committee that it might potentially be a difficult one to get further consultation on. Members of the committee pointed out elements which they thought could be strengthened at this point in order to make it a more comfortable document to read, pointing out things like improved glossary, signposting to relevant parts for particular towns. And also a concern was raised within the committee about the protection of the public realm and protection of public realm spaces in all the towns mentioned, and that this wasn't perhaps reflected in that document. Furthermore, the reflection of the importance of the surrounding villages as well to those town centres, and that the consideration should be given to those people who have to drive in order to use town centre facilities when considering the issues of parking in the context of town centre strategy. So you will see that we absolutely recommend it to go further for consultation, and just ask that you take steps to make sure it's a really effective consultation out there from this point on, because we recognise how important it is to shaping council policy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions for Councillor Winchester? No. Can I just say how much we do appreciate Overview and Scrutiny's work on this, and in general, you do always give us good things to feedback on, and we do appreciate the work. So moving on, may I ask for Councillor Donna Wright to present the report, please?
Thank you, Chair. So as members will be aware, our adopted local plan requires us to prepare and maintain up-to-date town centre strategies to support our strategic policy approach and to respond to any changes since the local plan evidence base was prepared. So there obviously have been a number of significant changes in this period that include a continuing shift to more online shopping, changing retail markets, cost of living pressures, and the impact of the pandemic on our town centres. So updates to the existing 2008 town centre strategies have been necessary to reflect the changed environment that our town centres are now operating in. We obviously want our town centres to continue to be welcoming and vibrant locations for our residents. So an overarching strategy for the district has been prepared by the Council's commissioned consultants, Litchfields, and this can be found in Appendix A. The document includes separate vision statements, SWOT analyses, and priority areas for each of the town centres. So that's Hitchin, Letchworth, Baldock, and Royston. Moving to an overarching model rather than having 4 distinct town centre strategies has saved significantly more officer time and resource, and has helped to speed up the process so that we might better manage speculative development proposals during the local plan review period. It has also enabled cross-cutting planning-based thematic policies to be identified, as well as key investment priorities tailored to the needs of each individual town centre. It should be noted that the purpose of the strategy is also to act as a bridge between the current local plan and its future review, and to provide a good practice guidance for developers and planning officers when developing and determining planning applications. It also supports the major objectives within the council plan: thriving communities, accessible services, responsible growth and sustainability. And it links into other relevant key documents and strategies, such as the Economic Development Strategy, the Churchgate Development, etc. Although the strategy has been prepared using the same process as a supplementary planning document, it does include proposals that differ from the local plan due to recent changes. So because of this, it can't be formally adopted as an SPD, but it can be adopted as a material planning consideration for relevant planning applications. Moving forwards, it will also help to ensure that North Herts town centres are recognised and agreed plans are carried forward through local government reorganisation. The document itself is divided into 4 sections, with part 3 focused on the specific strengths and weaknesses of each town centre. Obviously, effective implementation and delivery of the strategy's recommendations is crucial, and part 4 proposes further actions together with several funding and delivery options that the council could consider in delivering the ambitions set out within the strategy. Successful delivery of the strategy will depend on working closely with key partners and stakeholders, and formal consultation will be used to gather support from these partners. This is important for delivering the priorities and actions identified for each town centre. Feedback from the consultation will help shape a clear, action-focused delivery plan in the final version of the strategy. This plan will be designed to be regularly reviewed and updated. Initial drafts of the strategy have been reviewed by the Strategic Planning Board that has cross-party member and officer representation, and the final draft was also considered by the Political Liaison Board in October, and obviously ONS on the 11th of November. Subject to Cabinet approval, it will be issued for public consultation in late 2025, with a final version anticipated to be presented for adoption in early 2026. We appreciate the scrutiny that ONS provided and have certainly taken all those comments on board, including, improving the glossary, signposting for the different sections, and the protecting the public realm. So we thank the committee for the scrutiny it provided. To conclude, the recommendations for Cabinet are that the draft town centre strategy and its associated appendices be endorsed and approved for public consultation. Secondly, that delegated authority is granted to the Director Place in consultation with the Executive Member for Place to make any minor non-material corrections, including but not limited to cosmetic additions or presentational alterations. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions? I have one. What's the total length of time that this report has taken from when it was first undertaken to when we've taken it to overview and scrutiny?
I think I'll pass that over to Nigel because I wasn't involved in the early stages. So, Nigel, if you could take that, please.
Thank you, Councillor Wright. It's a little over 18 months. We basically did the work in 2 phases. So we commissioned evidence work in January 2024, which literally was completed, which did all the number crunching that sits underneath that. And then it was, I wouldn't know the precise month, but it was later that year we started working on the actual strategy itself, which obviously then came to overview and scrutiny earlier this month.
And if I can follow on from that, while I very much appreciate all the work that was done, is there a reason it took quite so long?
Well, unfortunately, there have been some resource constraints. So you'll see in paragraph 15.2 of the report, this refers to the fact that a town centre project officer post was established to lead on the delivery of the strategy, but unfortunately that post wasn't successfully filled. But I'll hand over to Nigel, as he's probably the best person to talk about resourcing.
Thank you, Councillor Wright. Yeah, I'd say resources was the main reason. As Councillor Wright's outlined, we established a post to lead this work several years ago, which we never permanently filled, unfortunately. So we've had a variety of consultant support, temporary agency staff and fixed term contracts as the project's gone on. So it has been passed around a bit. Obviously, the strategic projects and infrastructure manager has provided the sort of continuity, her own input and oversight, but that's part of a very broad portfolio that she looks after, with a number of priority projects in your council delivery plan, as well as high profile issues such as Luton Airport, parking and so on. So yeah, resources has been the main reason. You'll also be aware, as set out in the report, there was quite a bit of discussion around both the scope and then the detailed content as we went through as well. So it's been through a few iterations.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Are there any other further questions, Councillor Albert?
Cheers. Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Donna and all the team for all the work that's and Dan previously as well. All the work's been done on this, and it's a really welcome to have this. A couple of quick questions. A really stupid one first. So what's the definition formally of town? For this purpose, I'm particularly thinking, obviously conscious that that we've got other centres like Nebworth and Codicop, but particularly Nebworth that is a large village, or indeed so just because obviously that's important as well in thinking about our sort of towns and villages across there and the impact there. And then the second thing was around. In the sort of Hitchin area, it talks about obviously developing a transport strategy. Is there any sort of detail as to when that might happen by? And really, maybe just as a point up, I don't think it specifically mentions in there as the sustainable transport hub for Hitchin about the kind of work that's been going on that Alistair Strathern particularly has been leading on about how we can improve the station access as well, which also fits into the local cycling and walking plans that the North Herts and the County Council have developed.
Yeah, it's a good question about the definition of a town. I don't think I know the answer, so I'll hand over to Nigel in a minute to see if he knows. In terms of the transport strategy, it is on the agenda. Obviously, there's a lot of work going on in the team at the moment, so but it is on the agenda. We do see it as a priority. Good point about the work that's going on around the station access led by Alistair Stratton, and we can certainly make sure that that's included in the final draft of the document. But I'll hand over to Nigel for see if he's got an answer to that first question around definition of town.
Thank you, Councillor Wright. Yeah, it flows from the local plan is the short answer. We have to identify a hierarchy of centres. So the 4 main town centres, Hitchin, Letchworth, Baldock, Royston, are classified as towns in that sense. But the policy also recognises there is a range of other village centres and local centres, Knebworth, as you mentioned, Ashwell, and smaller centres within the larger settlements of the district as well.
Thank you very much. Are there any further questions? And I might need you to wave because our system is being quite slow today. Wonderful. In that case, the recommendation is that Cabinet, and this recommendation is the same as the one from Overview and Scrutiny, endorse and approve the draft town centre strategy attached as Appendix A to the report and its associated appendices for public consultation. And 2.2, delegate authority to the Director of Place in consultation with the Executive Member for Place to make any minor non-material corrections, including but not limited to cosmetic additions or presentational alterations to the draft town centre strategy as considered necessary for public consultation. Councillor Wright, would you care to propose? May I have a seconder, please? Councillor Allen. Thank you. We move to the debate. I'm very excited to see that this has got here. I'll be even more excited to see it get through full council and go into use. It's something that is needed to promote our towns, especially with the changes coming with LGR, which we'll get to. We've got huge opportunities in our towns, major developments coming to the largest ones. And I think that this really is a great step forward for North Herts to be able to put across what we can do to help develop North Hertfordshire towns. Does anyone else have anything they would like to say? Councillor Albert.
Cheers. Thanks, Chair. I mean, I really welcome this document, as I said just now, and I think it's a real opportunity for us to both tell I think a really positive tale about all of the towns in the district, but also recognising that this can also help us look to ways in advance of LGR and after LGR of how we improve the towns in our district. And there's lots of really good ideas and great policies and suggestions, and we talked just now about the transport policy for Hitchin and similarly for other towns, and so I really welcome that. Certainly welcome the idea of coming to the community forums, and I know that Don and Louise and others will be coming to those meetings. Thank you for spending lots of time coming around the community fora for that. And I think I know that in Hitchin, I'm sure it'll be true in other towns as well, this will be really welcomed. We've had lots of questions in the past around the town centre strategy, updating it, and certainly how it links into the work that's been done separately around Churchgate and so on. So really welcome the idea of the consultation, and do take on board the points that I think that Councillor Winchester said earlier on, just obviously how we can make this as accessible as possible, and whether is particularly maybe the very least whether we want to publish. I don't know how sensible it is to publish things that are very town related, that as a shorter document that may be slightly more accessible for residents and so on, but because we really want to prompt a really good discussion about this in advance of coming back to council. But welcome the document and totally support the recommendations.
Thank you very much. Okay, Councillor Debenham.
Thanks, Chair. I won't let Councillor Albert have all the stupid questions. Does recommendation 2.2 cover any of the changes suggested by ONS? Because I think that this makes some very good points there and we should take them on board.
That is a good question. Not a stupid one, a good one. And one I do not have the answer to. What I will suggest is that I ask now if Nigel can answer that or if Donna can answer. Donna, you've got your...
I would define them as non-material, possibly cosmetic additions personally, but that's probably a debate to be had.
Can I ask Nigel's opinion as well?
I think the intention was that we would take on board the comments from overview and scrutiny almost as part of the consultation exercise. As we've outlined, obviously we're going out for the consultation draft at the moment. The very valid points raised by Councillor Winchester and ONS, but I think our present intention was to incorporate them into the final version rather than sort of revisiting the version in front of you tonight and sort of trying to slot those things in at this stage.
That okay, Councillor Debenham? Excellent. They will be considered and put through, and when we go to full council, which I'm sure we will, we can double check that they're all there. Thank you very much. In that case, we have a proposer and a seconder. I don't have anyone else looking to speak, so maybe go to the vote, please.
Chair, that motion is carried.
We now move on to item 10, the procurement strategy 2025 to 2028. This is a referral from the Finance, Audit and Risk Committee. Can I invite their chair, Councillor Sean Nolan, to present the referral on this item?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the rearranging of the items tonight to allow some of us a slightly earlier exit than we would otherwise have had. It's very appreciated with two small children. So in discussions around this item, the committee were particularly interested in the go local elements, how that is used, and particularly how the scoring there potentially affects the ability of the council to look for local procurement within its contracts. I think it's understood that there's clearly a balance to be had there in terms of how much weighting is put into the overall scoring in terms of the locality of the business, whether it's based in North Herts or has a significant presence, and the scoring that goes alongside that. One of the big asks, I think it was accepted by officers, was some form of metric in understanding what effect that particular part of the scoring criteria actually has in terms of where contracts are awarded. Ian Cooper was very forthcoming in sort of explaining the process there and what we could potentially do in terms of metrics in the future. Yeah, I think there was a bit more discussion as well around some of the KPIs, how they're used and how potentially we use those to look at the strategy in future and how it can be potentially looked at again once we understand what effect the updated strategy would have in terms of procurement. But I think realistically, it was the local criteria that was probably the key points that were discussed there. I think it was recognised by the committee that the ability of the council to focus on local procurement is a very important one. It's a big thing we can do to support our residents. But clearly, there are much wider elements as well that need to be considered when we do let contracts beyond just where they're based. Thank you very much.
Are there any questions for Councillor Nolan? No. In that case, may I please ask that Councillor Albert presents the report, please.
Cheers. Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Councillor Nolan and the Finance Committee for their consideration and comments that he's just delivered. And I think there's some really important points there, both for now and indeed in the future about how we manage the sort of metrics and provide information for FAR, indeed overview and scrutiny around how we're doing that and developing those KPIs. But as I say, this procurement strategy reflects the changes to our procurement rules and also ensuring alignment with our council plan. Section 2 of Appendix A sets out 4 key aims: delivering value for money, maximising public benefit, transparency in our communications, and acting with integrity. The remaining sections detailed further goals, including commercial innovation, engaging with small and medium-sized enterprises, SMEs, and engaging voluntary community and social enterprises, VCSEs, and how we would seek continuous improvement. Annex A, which I think is particularly important, outlines our revised Go Local policy, which aims to encourage the flow of money back into North Herts, but obviously entirely accepted the point that Councillor Nolan raised around that. And FAR recommended there was that clear link between the contract procurement rules, this document, and our internal detailed guidance. So therefore would recommend that we approve this document with one small change. At the end of the introduction in section 1, we add the following sentence: that our internal procurement guidance will reflect the contents of this strategy and our contract procurement rules, to give our contract managers a detailed toolkit to be applied to the procurements that they undertake. I think that's a really important thing to take on board, because it's no point having strategy, policies, rules. We need obviously to work with our staff who are busy, but to actually make sure that there's an understanding and a clear policy around of how we develop this. And I know this is something that the contract procurement group that Ian Cooper and Rachel Cooper will lead on, that would be discussing at their forthcoming meetings. So the full feedback from FAR, as I touched on, also commented on how we use and report on the KPIs in section 6, and I very much, as I say, agree with those comments, and it is something that we will be working on. So with that amendment, Chair, that additional sentence that I read out, I'd like to move the recommendations that are attached in the report that we approve the procurement strategy attached at Appendix A, and say happy you take that as the moving of the paper. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. May I have a seconder with the amendment, please? Councillor Bryant.
Happy to second with the amendment.
Wonderful. We have the proposer and the seconder. Is there any debate? I'm really happy to see support from North Herts District Council to local businesses. It's good to see this is continuing, and thank you very much to officers for all their work on it. I don't see anybody else looking to speak on this one. So in that case, may we go straight to the vote, please?
Chair, that motion is carried.
Thank you. Item 11 is the medium-term financial strategy for 25 to 30. This is again a referral from the Finance, Audit and Risk Committee. May I ask their chair, Councillor Sean Nolan, to present the referral on this item.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's fair to say that uncertainty was the watchword of the discussions around much of what we were looking at in this medium-term financial strategy. Given that we're still awaiting the outcome of the discussions around future council funding for the next 3-year settlement, it's fair to say there is a wide range of potential futures for the council's finances at the current time. I believe in the agenda pack, it's the agenda supplement which contains the table showing the variances in terms of the future state of the budget and the council's finances. I'd definitely recommend, and I have been stressed to recommend to everyone to please read through that and give it a good read in terms of the effect we may have to look at in terms of spending decisions going forward. It's worth saying that there are big variances in the numbers. So we're looking at anywhere between 0.32 million and 2.97 million pounds as a budget gap by 2029, 2030. Again, to Ian Cooper and his team, I can imagine that there are some headaches over trying to manage that with the different levels of potential spending changes you'd need to incorporate there. Alongside this, obviously, we have the costs around LGR and Churchgate included as items in there that have to be considered. Again, it's items of uncertainty where there are ranges to be considered, whether it is future incomes we don't know yet, whether it is other costs that are, I think, as we've seen tonight already, kind of holding up other pieces of work. There was discussion around exactly what effects those would have there. The item around the council tax reduction scheme, I think it's welcome that it's being looked at in terms of reducing potential council tax for those with debilitating illnesses. Beyond what is already offered by the council. Clearly, a range of options is the right way to go in terms of understanding both what can be provided and the effects that would have on council finances going forward. I think the committee are very welcoming of seeing those options in the future to understand the effect they would have. And just the point as well around the development we have going on within the district as well and the effect that might have on the council tax base. I think generally the feedback there, again, that was discussed around is the fact that larger developments will bring something in, but obviously for every improvement, there is going to be a cost as well in terms of services provided there. And those larger developments, while increasing the tax base quite a lot in themselves, bring around need for extra staff and extra services as well to be delivered. So I think, yeah, that's really a summation, I think, of the main points discussed by the committee.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions for Councillor Nolan? I've got one. You mentioned there about the fair funding, about the 3-year settlement being discussed. Was the fair funding formula also discussed by FAR?
It was in the sense that we were hoping for more information on what it would set out. Probably best to pass over to Ian Cooper in terms of any more detail. But as far as I'm aware, we're still awaiting the outcomes there. So therefore, it was discussed, I think, in its absence than in its actuality.
So yeah, the fair funding formula is what will set the 3-year funding settlement. So they're pretty much intertwined and into the same thing.
Discussed in its absence. I quite like that. Right. Thank you ever so much, Sean. Can I ask Councillor Ian Albert to present the report, please? Oh, sorry. I do apologise, Amy. My screen is not working. Councillor Amy Allen.
Of course it's not. You mentioned the changes regarding those who have debilitating illnesses. How are you going to what's the word? Define. Thank you. How are you going to define that? And does it come under any kind of other financial element, financial aid like DLA or anything like that? What kind of clarifying features are there?
So the discussion was around a suggestion. I think it's the Marie Curie charity that have put this idea forward, and there's some more papers and discussions that are being considered. I believe that the definitions are all those that they provided. So I believe it's debilitating and terminal illnesses that are the consideration. Again, at this point, it was purely included in there because I know it's an idea that has been discussed. What's been looked at the moment, I think there's a range of options, none of which were fully determined in the papers at this point. It's purely a kind of, again, in terms of the medium-term financial strategy, setting out ideas that may affect council finances over that period and something to be considered in terms of the effect it will have going forward. So there's not much more detail than that, other than I think, yeah, again, it's Marie Curie that are the charity that have kind of put the proposals forward in the form so far.
Thank you. And again, my apologies for not seeing. If you do want to speak, please wave at me. And if I miss you, I apologise. Jazz hands. Councillor Albert.
Cheers. Thanks, Chair. And perhaps if I just start on that last point in relation to the work we're doing and officers are doing in relation to Marie Curie. I think colleagues will be aware, I've mentioned it on other meetings, that Manchester City Council would looked at a scheme for those with terminal illnesses to be able to provide that on their council tax reduction scheme exemptions. Marie Curie were working closely with them, and indeed have written to all councils about that, encouraging to them other councils to consider that. We've taken that on board a couple of months ago. We are looking at what the things that we can do. We're also looking to talk to Marie Curie directly, and also particularly, I think, to ask Marie Curie about the things that we might be able to do additionally to that which we are already doing, and give discretion as part of our discretionary schemes. And I don't know, that's something that officers are working on, and we will be able to come back to you when we look at the council tax reduction scheme in a bit more detail, and that paper later in the year, or early next year, that will come to Cabinet and Council. But I think we've got a really good record already to tell about our council tax reduction scheme, and if we can make further improvements, and indeed obviously look at the discretionary payments that we may be able to offer, certainly in line with the things that Marie Curie is suggesting, then we will certainly look to be able to do that where we can, and if we can. Turning to the paper in a bit more detail. I mean, I didn't tend to spend loads of time this evening, Chair, you'll be pleased to hear, in relation to this. We had delayed the medium-term financial strategy in the hope that there would be more clarity on future funding. However, we've not yet had the expected policy statement, and indeed confirm that, as per the usual timescales, we're looking to get the settlement just as our Christmas present, probably in a few days before Santa arrives, and we will then see, and obviously our finance team hopefully won't spoil their Christmases too much, but I think the important thing to mention about the settlement is that we are having a 3-year settlement for the first time for many years, and I think that has given additional certainty to local government, assurance to local government that they will be able to plan forward, and no LGR notwithstanding, and we'll debate LGR later on, but clearly that ability to be able to plan further forward. The strategy is included, Appendix A, follows the same format as previous strategies. There is specific references to fair funding within there, the expected new formula, and the current uncertainty. And I'll come to that additional addendum, which is in the supplementary papers to this meeting in a moment. But clearly, the spread there of £2.6 million on table 1 of Appendix A are not worst case and best case scenarios, but two possible scenarios that could happen depending on government decisions. In theory, there could be a better positive case, and indeed, I guess, a worse negative case. But clearly that is something that we're waiting to hear more about. The council does have reserves, which gives us time to react to potential options outlined in the report. We've had the budget workshops. All parties were involved in those discussions around those workshops, and looking at the kind of priorities that we want to set going forward. I very much sort of take on board the points that Councillor Nolan made in relation to local government reform, and making sure that we're keeping that in view in terms of, in this point, in terms of actually what additional work or resources we need to do that, and set aside to do that. Clearly, Churchgate will be bringing papers to full council in the future around that, and needing to make some key decisions going forward in the coming months about that significant project. But it is important to say, that we do have the reserves to be able to manage this, and significant reserves in that. But I say the strategy sets out there should be a commitment to react appropriately to the final funding position if required, not looking to make significant savings in 26-27, and we don't need to have delivered all the savings by 28-29, but we do need, if necessary, to have a deliverable plan, to have a balanced medium-term budget. As I mentioned far, there was a reference to information on future reserve levels, and this has been provided, I think, helpfully as a supplementary item. And I think gives you, again, within that item, those range of options. But I think what we also know here is that there are things that are potentially out there that aren't included within that. Obviously, it talks about in that paper, if the council chose, the worst case here, if the council chose not to make any savings. But we will always have a record of looking for savings and efficiencies to do that. So I think the negative case here around our reserves actually is predicated on something that simply won't happen. But I think the other part is, and I know from here in terms of my role on the County Council Pensions Committee, that employers are likely to gain because of the state of the pension fund at county level, a significant benefit in having to pay lower employment contributions because of the healthy state of our staff's pension scheme. And I think that itself will obviously also gain a financial benefit there. And we can see actually that the things that we've been doing that actually have significantly increased our reserves at the starting point to potentially up to 19.6 million. So that actually leaves us, and bear in mind that the actual minimum reserves is 3 million. That just shows actually that where we've been able to manage our council funds with the expertise of Ian Cooper and his team, I think, well and prudently, and providing value for money for our residents. And I think puts us in a good starting point to manage whatever comes out of the settlement, and indeed, obviously, hopefully to manage the LGR process. So, Chair, I think I'll sort of conclude there. I'm really keen that we agree this report this evening for its referral to council, but I entirely accept that the devil's in the detail, and we would like to have had more detail in this report, and we will obviously have that more detail in advance when we come to the formal budget setting process in the coming month, running up to the February council budget meeting. But in the meantime, happy to move this report, Chair, and hope the Cabinet will unanimously adopt it.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions for Councillor Albert? Can I ask Councillor Albert, how has feedback been on the new way of communicating the strategy ahead of the meeting? Because I know that it was brought to us as councillors in a different way that it has been before. Has there been much feedback? Personally, I preferred it.
I've not done any significant. I don't know if Mr. Cooper wanted to. No, he's shaking his head. Not been any significant feedback. I mean, I hope that people have found the process both useful, and also the way we did the budget workshops sort of useful as a way of trying to discuss and look at our key priorities. And I think it's also important here to obviously recognise that we did do that as we brought to the budget workshops, but asked residents for their feedback, and we took those things on board, and we'll continue to take those on board as we go through the budget process. So I think hopefully all of those things brought together will provide, I think, a benefit, and we've got quite a lot of people signed up to our budget hub, and hopefully that we'll be able to update those things in the coming months.
Thank you very much. In that case, the recommendation is 2.1. We approve the medium-term financial strategy as attached as Appendix A amended. I have another question from Councillor Wright. You didn't wave, Donna.
But you were looking. Yeah, I just wanted to ask about the reserves. So I think you said 19.6 million, which is very encouraging. Is that capital or revenue reserves?
That's That's revenue reserves. Yeah, I mean for capital, as we've said in other meetings, we are in a position where we likely to need to borrow internally to fund future sort of capital programs. We'll obviously look into for ways to increase our capital receipts to help that. But this is all about general fund revenue reserves.
Thank you.
Thank you. In that case, the recommendation is that we approve the medium-term financial strategy as attached to Appendix A amended. We have a proposer in Councillor Albert. May I have a seconder, please? Councillor Wright. We move to the debate. Does anyone have anything they would like to say? So, somebody very intelligent said to me the other day that since 2010, we've been conditioned to think that local government is about saving money. It's not. Local government is about providing services. And I genuinely believe this medium-term financial strategy will put us in a better position as North Herts District Council to do that. So thank you ever so much to Ian, and all the officers that have worked on this. If I don't see anybody else waving at me, I will suggest we move forward to the vote, please.
Chair, that motion is carried.
Thank you. The next item is item 8, local government reorganisation in Hertfordshire, submission of final proposals. And I'd also like to state that we did receive an email today from Councillor Tom Tyson, which I do know that Cabinet have seen and received. So I just wanted to state that. We also had an email today from the member of the public that spoke at full council, and I will refer to that in a minute. In the meantime, may I please invite Councillor Ralph Muntzer to present?
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much, Councillor Allen, firstly for the opportunity to present to Cabinet this evening, but also throughout this process, you have been very open, honest and transparent with respect to local government reorganisation, and that very much is appreciated. And I just wanted to place that on the public record. But I'm here tonight to talk about principles. The politics is all about principles. Those we hold dear, those we seek to advocate for, and those we seek to defend. And one would hope, after we are all Democrats, after all, we all have been elected by our various communities from across North Hertfordshire to represent the best interests of those communities at this authority. And it was last week in this chamber that the democratically elected representatives of the people of North Hertfordshire gathered to discuss, debate and vote on the future governance of our district. The message at that meeting was clear. A majority of councillors at this authority do not support 4 unitary authorities for Hertfordshire, but I don't intend to go over the debate. After all, we all were there. However, we have been told this is a Cabinet decision, which is why we are here tonight. And therefore, Cabinet has a choice. Listen to and support the will expressed by Council last week, or back 4 unitary authorities, and don't be surprised when the realities of being a minority administration come to bear at the next meeting of Council. I will say I don't envy the position of Councillor Allen or Labour colleagues tonight. In fact, I have a degree of sympathy for them. After all, no one can serve 2 masters. But I would encourage him and Cabinet colleagues to take note and follow the example of the leader of the Dacorum Borough Council, Councillor Sally Symington, who was faced with a dilemma not too dissimilar to that of which faces colleagues tonight. Councillor Symington and her administration chose to follow the will of Dacorum Borough Council despite it being contrary to her own. And therefore, I would urge colleagues, do not run roughshod over democracy, for it is not in the interests of anyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Muntzer. If you wanted to lecture me on principles, however, you probably shouldn't have walked out of Council's chamber when it was your turn to show some earlier today. Right. Before we move on to the business of local government reorganisation, I need to set the record straight clearly and unequivocally. We have received formal advice from King's Counsel. That advice states, without ambiguity, that the vote of full council must be considered by the Cabinet, but it must not predetermine our decision. Cabinet members are legally required to come to this meeting with an open mind. Anything else would be unlawful. However, in the lead up to today, there have been actions that directly challenge that requirement. At full council, Councillor Muntzer stated openly that if Cabinet does not follow the council's vote, confidence in the administration will be questioned. That has been echoed again today. Separately, I was approached privately by Councillor Ruth Brown, who informed me that if I did not personally vote in line with council, a vote of no confidence in me would be tabled by the Liberal Democrat group. Let me be absolutely clear. That is political pressure. And it places members of this Cabinet in an intolerable position. If any of us cast our votes today under threat, explicit or implied, we would be breaking the law. We'd be acting with a predetermined mind, and I'll not allow this Cabinet to be forced into an unlawful decision. Frankly, I don't think the implications of these threats were fully understood when they were made, but the consequences are real. Our duty, our legal duty, is to the residents we serve and to the integrity of the decision-making process, not to political tactics of any group or individual. So I'm drawing a line firmly under the political games of the last week. They end here. They have no place in this meeting. Today we'll listen to officers, scrutinise evidence and debate openly. And each Cabinet member will vote according to their judgment and the best interests of North Hertfordshire, free from pressure, free from threats, and fully within the law. Right. Are there any points of clarification from members on that? No. Councillor Amy Allen.
Thank you, Chair. I have some clarifying questions regarding this political pressure. The advice from King's Counsel and what all of this actually means for the decision we make. We as in members of the Cabinet that are here tonight voted for a 4-unitary option at full council because we believed it was the best option. Still believe it's the best option, although I'm open to hearing what everyone has to say tonight from officers and what we've also received in emails. We voted for a 4-unitary because we believe it's the best option for our residents. If because of what Councillor Ruth Brown, leader of the Liberal Democrat opposition, has said, and because she has spoken to you, stating there will be a vote of no confidence against you, and we suddenly change our vote to option 2 simply because that's what they want, then we become the ones breaking the law. That makes tonight's decision not only significant but deeply complicated. There is also the wholly unimpressive behaviour to consider. If we vote for tonight, there is this alleged vote that's going to go in. I find it frankly ridiculous, and it's indicative of dirty politics. Yeah, you can nod away. But if we vote 2, it's equally clear that we are doing so under duress and political coercion. I said what I said, which would mean we are breaking the law. So I could do some very clear advice on what this all means, particularly regarding behaviour expected of councillors under this councillor's code of conduct that we all agreed to and signed up to when we became council members. The Nolan Principles, which apply to anyone who works in public office, including anyone who is elected or appointed to public office, national and locally, and we've all agreed to uphold them. I feel the need to actually remind everybody what those principles are. Selflessness, integrity, objectivity, accountability, openness, honesty, leadership. A principle I'm upholding now by highlighting the behaviour and challenging it. And so with that said, I would greatly appreciate this being spelled out to me as simply as possible, because that is actually on the level I'm operating on right now.
I'm going to pass that across to our Director of Governance.
Thank you, and thank you for the question. I think it's important to clarify that we're discussing political pressure, and matters relating to any sort of political pressure are not relevant considerations for Cabinet, and they should not be taken into account in making this decision tonight. They have no bearing on the lawfulness on the executive function that you all hold as Cabinet members. As you all know, under the Local Government and Public Involvement in Health Act 2007, this decision is a executive function. That means that Cabinet is the decision maker, and members should note that this is not only an executive an executive decision, but it is your discretion, and it cannot be fettered by being bound by the views of others. So you have to come here today with an open mind. Your legal duty is to approach this item, like I said, with an open mind, and to determine it solely on the basis of the lengthy report that I'm sure you've all digested and you'll hear about again today, and the appendices attached to that, the statutory criteria, the consultation responses, the financial and governance analysis, and the advice of King's Counsel, which has been sent well in advance of the full council meeting. So we did go to full council, and full council's indicative view from last week is a relevant but non-binding factor and should be noted for context, and Cabinet should have due regard to that. But it cannot be treated as determinative, because if you came here today and you said, I'm 100% voting a certain way, then you're not coming here with an open mind. And I think that's really important that you take into consideration everything that we've just discussed when you do come to the vote. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is that okay? Thank you. Councillor Albert.
Could I suppose just sort of clarify one point for us, because I think, and I think formally for the record, really, at the county council today, that we were given a discretion, and clearly, obviously, a number of us here, Councillor Munster, well, actually, no, Councillor Munster, he walked out for his early lunch, actually. But actually, that spoke in a debate at County Council today, and I spoke in favour of a particular option. I just want to clarify at that point about when you say to have an open mind, someone could argue you clearly haven't, Councillor Albert, got an open mind, because you spoke 12 hours ago, it feels like probably 12 years ago now, about in a county council debate today in favour of one particular option. I think it's really important to be able to clarify that and what exemptions and other discretions that we have here today.
Thank you, Councillor Albert. That's a really, really important question. I think it's important for members who are dual hatters, who hold seats both at district level and at county level, that they're reminded that while they may express a preference in this evening, they shouldn't give an assurance or commitment about how they may vote if and when similar matters are debated at another authority. So I suppose my advice is that members can come to this meeting with a predisposition in favour of another, one model or another, particularly where they've been involved with, at county level or in earlier workshops or resident engagement consultation exercises. They just must not provide an assurance or commit to a decision before this Cabinet meets this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Right. We are going to go over to Anthony Roche to present the report. Anthony.
Thank you, Chair. I will sort of cover some of the same ground that I covered at full council, because I think it's important to spell those points out, but also invite questions at the end. So what you have in front of you, as you'll know, is many months of work by many people across the whole Hertfordshire system, and I'm extremely grateful to everyone who contributed. There has been, as you all know, a significant impact on workloads, and that will continue for the next few years. I think it's really important to acknowledge that all of the Hertfordshire authorities have stayed together, whilst we might have had different views as to politically what might be a preferred outcome from this process. We have worked together to produce a single submission with 3 options. So an option for a 2-unitary, a 3-unitary or a 4-unitary model. And I'm unaware of any other areas who've managed to do that. So, and the strength of those relationships will help us with what comes next in the transition to whatever the future model is. The government set us this exam question of what the future structure in Hertfordshire should look like, and it's fair to say some would have preferred they hadn't. However, as with any challenge, there are lots of opportunities if we choose to take them, around modernisation, service delivery, removing district and county silos and bringing services together, for example, social care and housing, and also opportunities to reset the relationship with our communities. Also worth acknowledging that there is no correct answer to the exam question. Different people will have different views as to the most important factors, and that will lead to different answers to the question. All 3 options have advantages and disadvantages to them. Different options may suit different parts of Hertfordshire better. What works best for the South West may not work best for the East, and vice versa. We believe that we have produced a submission with 3 options that all meet the government criteria, with 3 options that could provide a step change in how we deliver services to our communities. Underpinning this is a shared vision and ambitions that are set out in paragraph 8.5 of the report. The government will judge any submission against 6 criteria, which are set out in 7.3 in the report. All criteria are equally weighted, and MHCLG officials have said that all options that are deemed to meet the criteria will be put to the public in the statutory consultation next year. Members may have picked up that literally today it's been announced that the reorganisation consultation, the statutory consultation for the areas on the devolution priority programme have commenced today to conclude on the 11th of January. As far as I can tell, every option that got submitted by those various areas has been put out to consultation. Members will also be aware that there was a decision recently in regards to Surrey, which was heavily influenced by the finances, as it was always going to be due to the level of debt carried across those authorities. MHCLG have been at pains to say that the Surrey decision should not be taken as an indication of future decisions elsewhere. The submission and the 3 mini proposals are as accurate and evidence-based as possible given the time period set by government. They are necessarily based on a set of assumptions, and much of the detail has not been worked up yet. For example, specific delivery models for specific services, and this is explained from paragraphs 8.8 onwards in the report. This will continue to evolve, recognising that some of these decisions will be for the new unitary councils to make in the future. Members will be aware that during September there was community engagement on the options, and this is set out in the submission document and summarised in the covering report at paragraphs 8.14 and 8.15. The positive aspect of the feedback was that it very much reflected the conversations that had already taken place with officers and members, and that there were no surprises in the feedback. The focus of the report and the submission is local government reorganisation. There is mention of the devolution ambition for Hertfordshire, and one of the criteria is how well the unitary models support a future devolution deal. However, MHCLG have made it clear that devolution is a separate process. As set out in paragraph 7.9, a letter to the Secretary of State was sent a couple of weeks ago, which is available on the Herts County Council website for those who haven't seen it. As yet, there is no government commitment to a particular timeline for devolution in Hertfordshire, so we have asked that it progresses in parallel to local government reorganisation. I've also checked today, and we haven't yet received a response to that letter. I would anticipate that response probably next month at a guess. I would imagine that the government will probably want to get the budget out of the way first before responding. Irrespective of the final decision by the Secretary of State next year, all councils through the Herts Leaders Group have committed to working together to implement that decision, and a statement to that effect is in the submission document. To that end, as explained in paragraph 8.16, work is already underway on the transition programme, looking at what we can do and need to do before the decision in July 26, between then and the Shadow Authority elections in May 27, from that point through to vesting day on 1st of April 28, and then from 1st of April 28 onwards. As this programme is developed, we will keep staff and councillors informed, as well as the public when it is relevant for them. I think we all recognise the importance of this subject, and therefore, Chair, I'm happy to invite questions. One point that I've picked up that we also did at full council, recommendation 2.1 needs to refer to appendices A to E, just because of the way we published the documents. The current recommendation just refers to Appendix A. But Chair, happy to invite any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anthony. Do you have any questions for Anthony? I can see Mick's light is on to begin with. Councillor Debenham.
Thank you. Thanks for that, Anthony. Since I've been a member of this council, I've either been a full member or a sub on the Planning Control Committee. And I think, as you all know, that committee meets more regularly than any other. If we were to go to a 2 unitary option with presumably 5 times the amount of applications, how many times do you envisage that committee having to meet?
Thank you. Ultimately, that would be a decision for the new unitary council to decide. They could adopt a central planning committee, which presumably would have to meet quite frequently to carry out that level of business. Worth flagging that the government has indicated in their planning reforms that they are seeking to introduce some standard terms of reference for planning committees. So depending on what they introduce and the criteria against which things fall before a committee versus being dealt with by officer delegated decision would also have an impact. The sorts of options open to the new unitary could be, as I said, single planning committee. They could also do area-based planning committees. So it would be before your time, councillor, but back in the day, planning decisions at North Herts were once taken by the area committees. And before we established the central planning committee. So that sort of approach could be adopted. And in terms of how the officers might be structured over a 2 unitary, my guess, but again, conversations not yet been had, my guess is you would probably want to and need to do area-based teams, because to expect a planner to have detailed knowledge of the policies, the locality of everywhere from Ashwell down to Cheshunt and all things in between would probably be a stretch even for the most talented of planning officers.
Thank you. Councillor Wright.
I think Amy may have been before me.
May I go for Councillor Allen then? Thank you.
Thank you. So in all the options, if a 3 unitary was selected, given that the Eastern Unitary is proposed to be around double the size of the other 2, could you outline how this structure would ensure equal access and accountability and representation for residents compared with the smaller unitary areas?
Thank you. I mentioned in my introductory remarks that all of the models have advantages and disadvantages. I think, to be honest, one of the potential disadvantages of the 3 is the disparity in size. In both the 2 and the 4, the councils are roughly the same size when they start. In the 3, that's not the case. And when the population modelling through to 2045 is taken into account, that disparity increases. So were that to be the model that government chooses, I think the Eastern Unitary would have to probably put in a lot more structure to ensure that that local representation and that engagement happens, because whenever you have a larger authority, there is probably going to need to be more effort and more structure put in place to make sure that happens, whereas in the smaller unitaries that might happen a bit more naturally. Ultimately, that will be a decision for that shadow authority to decide in due course. But it could include... My mic got turned off. It could include things like neighbourhood forums, but whether that's on the sort of scale of our current area committees, something smaller, something bigger, to be determined by that new unitary. Thank you.
Again, if I get these out of order, I'm going to do my best. Councillor Bright.
I'm just wondering what measures will be put in place to support staff during the transition to unitary authorities, particularly regarding redeployment opportunities and managing potential redundancies. And additionally, do you anticipate that certain structural models, either 2, 3 or 4, would pose greater challenges for retaining experienced staff?
Thank you. Thank you for acknowledging the impact on staff, because it is absolutely critical. And obviously, as the chief executive and therefore head of the officer structure, it is something that is, at the forefront of my thinking a lot. In terms of whether any particular model would present any particular challenges, or in terms of retention, really hard to say. I think it is worth acknowledging, in the same way that councillors all have different views as to the merits of the different models, officers do too, for exactly the same reasons. And I would be hard pressed to say that any one model was more popular than the others or would have more or less of an impact. I think it is worth acknowledging that in the 4 unitary, it is likely there will be less redundancies, because you would have more management structure needed because you've got 4 councils as opposed to 2 councils. So less of the senior managers would be made redundant. In terms of the more junior staff, it probably doesn't make much of a difference, because the number, using the planning example, the number of planning applications that there are on the 31st of March 2028 versus the 1st of April 2028 is not going to change. Therefore, you need the same number of planners to process them. But, you need 4 chief execs versus 3 or 2, and ditto for the number of CFOs, monitoring officers, directors, etc., etc. In terms of the broader thrust of your question around the support we'll be looking to put in place, we are currently, with our HR team, working up a new workforce strategy that is deliberately focused on what we need to do for this council to get through to 2028, but also what do we need to put in place to give our staff the best possible chance for whatever they want to do post 2028. And I put it that way in terms of whatever they want to do, because ultimately some might decide they don't want to work for the new unitaries, and that's absolutely fine. So what can we do to help support them if their future career ambition is elsewhere? Others might decide, no, absolutely, I want that, or I can see an opportunity for promotion through this. Okay, well, how can we put them in the best possible position for that? So that would be one of the key building blocks. In terms of the other things we're doing, just a huge amount of open, honest, transparent conversation, and that will carry on. And we've had a lot of really positive feedback as to how we've been engaging with staff on that, and I will continue to do that. Equally, members will be aware we ran staff conferences for the first time this year, and I think at each one did about an hour and a half discussion and Q&A with staff on it, answering all sorts of questions, some of which were too early to be able to answer. But the commitment I gave them it was, well, when we know the answer, or at least know when we'll be in position to answer, we'll tell you. So thank you.
Thank you. I'm not sure whether it was Val or Ian first. I'm going to go. It was Val. I will go with Val.
Okay, then. At full council, one of the councillors asked about the numbers of councillors representing residents. Please could you explain more the difference over the 2 to 3 and 4 unitaries with numbers of representatives to residents, including numbers of residents represented by each councillor?
Thank you. Yes, happy to explain. So the fundamental difference is that the 2 unitary and 3 unitary models have been based upon using the county divisions and adopting a model of 3 councillors per county division. The 4 model is based on the district wards. The reason for that is the proposed boundary changes within the 4 unitary model need to be based on the district wards. They don't work if you use the county divisions. Councillor Williams mentioned the example at full council of Great Ashby. If we use the county divisions in the 4 unitary model, Great Ashby potentially would go to the east with the proposed boundary changes, as opposed to being with Stevenage, just to use that as one of the examples. So the county divisions are based on a boundary review that was done in, I believe I'm right in saying 2017, and that at that stage the idea was to have equal weighting of councillors to residents. So in theory, all of those county divisions are the same size in terms of populations. Clearly, over the last 8 years, the populations have moved a bit, but broadly speaking, they're designed to be the same, which is why you have a situation where it's Baldock and Eastern Letchworth as a county division. That's not a natural community, but it's what you needed to get the right number. You'll be aware within North Herts, we had our own district boundary review 18 months or so ago now, and we adopted a particular ratio of, particular average ratio of councillors to electors, although there is some variation in that, which is why we have 1, 2 and 3 member wards, and there is still a percentage variation away from the average. The other district and boroughs have different ratios. So using the district wards for the 4-councillor model means you don't have equal representation across them. So part of the proposal has been to look to see how that can be equalised as best as possible. And currently there are 1, 2 and 3 member wards in North Herts and in some of the other district and boroughs. Others are more uniform. Broxbourne, I think I'm right in saying, are universally 3-member wards. In order to try to equalise some of that difference, the proposal has been to reduce the number of councillors by 1. So a 3-member ward becomes a 2-member ward, a 2-member ward becomes a 1-member ward, and a 1-member ward stays a 1-member ward. But that didn't quite work either, so there has been some manual adjustments, and I will get to in a moment as to what that means for North Herts. It is worth giving one important caveat that whatever government decides in the structural changes order as to the electoral structure for the new unitary authorities, be it based on divisions or on wards, that will essentially only last for the first administration of that council. During the course of that first administration, the Local Government Boundary Commission for England will do a review of the boundaries and will potentially come up with a set of recommendations that would then be implemented for the next scheduled election of that council. So what we're talking about, whichever model gets chosen, is something that has a limited lifespan anyway. But in terms of the impact for North Herts, we currently have 9 county divisions covering North Herts. So with a 3-councillor per county division model, that would mean 27 councillors representing North Herts residents in either the 2 unitary model or the 3 unitary model. One caveat on that, in the 2 unitary model, the proposed total number of councillors based on that 3 per county division is 117 in each of the 2 unitaries. The Local Government Boundary Commission for England has very explicitly said in a number of fora that they have a maximum of 100. Clearly, 117 is over that, and it is whether the government sees a problem with that or just thinks, well, for the first administration, actually, that doesn't really matter, it's close enough, and we'll just let it run, or whether they say, actually, that model's not going to work, and we will go with 2 members per county division, in which case for North Hertfordshire, in that scenario, it would only be 18 councillors. In the 4 unitary model, with manual adjustments to try and ensure the right number of representation, currently we have, as you all know, 51 district councillors. That would be replaced by 42 councillors in the unitary model spread across what is currently North Herts. So there would be more councillors in the 4 unitary model than there would be in either the 2 unitary or the 3 unitary model. in total.
That was a lot of information. Thank you. Councillor Albert.
Yeah, that was a lot of information. I think that's really helpful, actually. Clearly, one of the things in my role has been of particular interest is looking at the resources question and the financial modelling. And I think that's obviously formed quite a part of the debates that have happened, it's certainly in my knowledge, across all the districts and the county. And I appreciate the work that's gone into these figures. It would be helpful, I don't know if it's for Anthony or for Ian here, to clarify how the suggested £22 million deficit for the central unitary authority in the 4EA model has been calculated, and whether the modelling reflects a long-term financial output or indeed a shorter scenario. And we touched on fair funding and so on earlier on. It would be interesting to understand maybe what kind of effect we can expect to come from future financial modelling, including, if we include the fair funding formula and indeed the 3-year settlement.
Thank you. I will ask Ian Cooper to answer on the detail, not least of which because the amount of detail I've just gone into on wards versus divisions. I will just start by saying that it is, of course, within any government's gift to determine the funding allocation for any council. So if government decides they want a particular model, they can choose to make that work financially through fair funding review, revenue support grants, or any other financial levers they wish to pull. That's always open to them. But over to Mr. Cooper for the detailed answer to your question. Thank you.
Thank you. So the starting point looks at two different lenses, I guess. So you've got the looking at what are the total costs of LGR against the total savings that come out of it, and then comparing those two numbers. That's one way of looking at it, which is referred to throughout the report. The other bit that looks in more detail is that looking at taking those numbers and then overlaying that onto what's the funding going to do, which requires us to look at how do we split out the costs between the various unitaries under all the different scenarios. For the districts, that's nice and easy. We've got predefined footprints, albeit when you've got the 4 each model, we've got to split the bits out that are going to the east. But if you do that, that's one population, and isn't going to be a significant number in terms of the overall affordability and viability. But the county bit is more problematic. We've got to take the numbers of how to split their costs between the various areas, and that's the work we've attempted to do in that modelling, is to take that and look at how that kind of sits now, and then try to build in inflationary growth and other growth into there. At the same time, you can do that for funding as well. That's some ways simpler in some respects in terms of council tax is based on properties and numbers of bands of properties and that kind of thing. There are grants and stuff so they want to build in there as well, which then have to be split out on various bases. So in terms of the numbers you're talking about, Councillor Albert, in terms of that sort of deficit for the central authority, is looking at that kind of that more detailed picture around what's the funding going to do, what the costs going to do, and how do you split them out. It is the best estimates, particularly from county council colleagues, to do that because it is clearly a very complex area, and I think they've done a very good job of it. But that's the ultimate picture it gives. It is looking at the current basic funding formula, I guess, in terms of splitting it out. It does not take into account the new funding formula. One, because we don't know what it's going to be yet. And when we try to look at it in more detail, it gives them very confusing answers. And partly because actually the numbers that come out of it are still at county level. So the county budget, in terms of the funding formula, is looking at a county budget going forward. Yes, if you dig into enough detail, eventually you can separate it out into terms of the various components. There's a lot of stats that have to sit beneath that to try and do that. So it's just too complicated at the moment to do that. So there are scenarios that mean that funding deficit could be changed by government, and that could fall out of their funding formula. We do know, as set out in the kind of the detail on the 4 unitary option, there is higher deprivation in that area, and we know that one of the targets of the new fair funding formula is deprivation, albeit it's hard at this stage to work out how sensitive it will be in terms of how much of that gap it will address.
You are very welcome to come back on the.
No, only very briefly, and thanks for that, Ian. But I'm right in thinking that obviously, notwithstanding the point that you made, and notwithstanding those particular sort of scenarios around each of the options has been deemed as financially viable by the working group, the leaders, and obviously chief execs and finance officers.
Yes, I mean, clearly there's an issue there in that particular one district, but yeah, looking at them kind of in totality in each case, all of them make savings greater than their costs, all of them have a long-term viability. Clearly it's up for government to do something around that particular nuance there, but there are scenarios that mean that could happen and therefore be putting forward to you as a viable option.
Thank you very much. Councillor Debenham.
Thanks again, Chair. I was wondering about the housing lists in a new big authority. Is it possible then, if there's a central housing list and say the two unitary version, that say somebody living in my ward in Letchworth South East to get a flat might have to accept one in say Cheshunt or somewhere?
So that would depend on the adopted allocations policy of the new unitary council. In theory, I guess it's possible that people could be housed anywhere within that unitary area. Whether that would be the case in practice, I don't know. We have also seen quite a lot of criticism nationally about people being housed outside of their area, particularly some of the London boroughs moving people elsewhere in the country. So it would come down to the adopted policy and the political views of whoever it is that's running the new unitary. So it's possible. Whether it's likely, I can't comment at this stage.
Okay, I don't see any further questions. Thank you very much, Anthony. I would like to propose an amendment to go in. Following full council and comments I've had from Councillor Tom Tyson, discussions with Councillor Alistair Willoughby and contacts from residents, I'd like to put forward an amendment with a side letter. It would be that the Chief Executive, in consultation with the Leader of the Council, be authorised to formalise the form of wording for a side letter to be submitted to MHCLG to accompany the Council's formal submission. That the letter shall set out A, the outcome of the full Council deliberations, and B, the concerns raised by members regarding the proposed placement of the Arbory ward within alternative unitary configurations and the need for MHCLG to give this matter full consideration as part of the reorganisation process. That the finalised submission be issued by the Leader on behalf of the Council. So irrelevant of 2, 3 or 4, that is an amendment that I would like to have put in. So the recommendation would be that Council notes the content of the report with draft Hertfordshire submission documents at Appendix A to E, which forms the proposed collective submissions of government on local government reorganisation, and the indicative non-binding view of full council at its meeting on the 13th of November 2025. And 2.2 resolves one of the following options. Either A, submit the proposal and identify the 2 unitary option as preferred. B, submit the proposal and identify the modified 3 unitary option as preferred and request the Secretary of State formally modify the proposal by agreeing boundary changes as set out in the proposal. C, submit the proposal and identify the modified 4 unitary option as preferred and request the Secretary of State formally modify the proposal to agreed boundary changes as set out in the proposal. D, submit the proposal without identifying a preferred option. 2.3, to delegate the authority to the Chief Executive and Leader of the Council to agree any final minor amendments to the Hertfordshire submission document prior to submission to Government by the 28th of November 2025, and the amendment as I have put forward. May I have a proposer, please? Councillor Williams. Seconder. Councillor Debenham. Right. I want to remind members that Cabinet must give regard to the views expressed at full council. While we must reach our own lawful decision, the indicative preference expressed by members will be an important consideration for us this evening. We will debate all recommendations together. However, we will take each vote separately, with the vote on 2.1 and 2.3 taking place using the electronic voting system. The vote on 2.2 will be taken through a roll call of members, much as it was at full council. I am going to request a recorded vote on 2.2. Before we move into the debate, I am, however, going to suggest a comfort break. So we are going to take a break before we go into debate. I look forward to seeing everybody back in 10 minutes' time. Thank you. Right, thank you everybody and welcome back. We are going to go into the debate where we will have 3 minutes per member, much in the way that we normally do, to go over our statements. As we said, the votes 2.1 and 2.3 and 2.4 will be done. 2.4 being the amendment will be the electronic voting system. 2.2 will be the individuals saying their preferences. Debate. Who would like to speak on the debate? Councillor Debenham.
Why not go first? Thank you. Well, clearly this is a very contentious decision, and also equally as clearly there is no consensus across the county as to what is the best way to go forward. Councils across the county are voting differently. Political parties in different councils are voting differently. The leader of our Conservative group voted in favour of the 2 in our council and abstained today in the county council. Our residents were in favour of a 4 unitary, and the council voted for a 2, but not by majority of the councillors. 24 councillors voted for the 2 authority, therefore 27 did not support it. So there's no consensus anywhere. We've heard from our chief executive that there's 2 choices when it comes to planning: either a monolithic organisation where there'll be so many meetings that people won't have the time to do site visits because there'll be 1 a day and they'll be travelling all around the county, or we make it into smaller groups. We've heard that housing, people, I said from my ward, could end up possibly, not so they will, could end up living in Cheshunt or somewhere, or we could do it on a much local basis, which begs the question, why not make that question for them, make it easier, and have the smaller council to start with? That's what our residents want. I believe that local government should be local. We've heard that a lot of our members in our meeting last week started off saying if they had the choice, they'd stay where we are with 10 councils. And from that, they went straight to the other extreme and voted for 2. No, 3 never got a mention. They don't like 4 for splitting up parts of North Herts. And I agree with what Councillor Tyson said in his letter. I've got a lot of sympathy for that. The idea of an A1 and an A10 corridor, certainly Arbury would be on the A1 side of that. So I think that's not unreasonable, the amendment that we're putting forward. I worry that going back to planning, I say if we have the large authority, we'll have people who don't know the areas. Our contentious planning decisions have been around solar farms, which are generally rural areas. We could get people who don't even know where these villages are. Also, we'll get trying to wind up. So I think that the first 2 golden cities of the country and the first new town is the perfect fit. And I think the 2 is the best. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Debenham, and I apologise for not giving you a 30-second warning. Did you misword yourself there? Apparently you said 2 was the best option, not the 4, but...
The 2 golden cities, the first 2 golden cities, and the first new town in an authority, just those 3 authorities. Thank you very much.
The existing authorities.
Well, the whole thing is there could be a 5th option if that's what central government decides, because at the end of the day, I won't go into my bit now. I'll wait till I've got my 3 minutes. Councillor Wright.
I've thought carefully about my decision tonight, taking into account the range of preferences expressed across Hertfordshire, as Councillor Dedman has just said, which includes in North Herts, where the majority of members present at council voted for the 2 unitary model, but public consultation favoured 4. All proposed models are deemed viable and no county-wide consensus has emerged. I will therefore be voting for the structure that I believe delivers the greatest benefits for the people of Hertfordshire, and that is the 4 unitary model. My support is rooted in the principles of local representation, accountability and connection, values that residents consistently tell us matter most. Smaller councillors are closer to the communities they serve, making decision-making more visible and responsive. A 2 unitary model would, in my view, be too large and remote, particularly for residents used to a district level approach. If we go too big, we risk taking the local out of local government. I also raised the question about staffing earlier because I believe this issue has been overlooked. Local government reorganisation aims to consolidate services, create efficiencies and remove tiers of governance. In reality, that means large-scale redeployment and redundancies, fewer people doing their job over a larger area. The financial impact of redundancies must be considered, as we've seen with the NHS Integrated Care Board mergers, where failure to factor in redundancy costs created major challenges. Beyond the financial implications, there is the human cost. Losing experienced staff, damaging morale and disrupting service continuity. I believe that larger unitary models carry a higher risk of job losses, particularly in corporate and governance areas and at senior levels. Earlier, Anthony acknowledged that this is likely to be the case. The short-term financial projections may look less favourable for the 2 unitary and 3 unitary models when redundancy costs are included. Large unitaries also make staff retention and redeployment more complex, increasing the risk of losing valuable expertise. A 4 unitary model mitigates these risks. Smaller authorities means less aggregation and more opportunities for redeployment within local areas, helping retain local knowledge and experience, critical for both our workforce and the communities they serve. In summary, I believe that the 4 unitary model offers the best balance for Hertfordshire, keeping local government truly local, protecting accountability and community connection, whilst minimising disruption to staff and services. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bryant.
Thank you. I watched the County Council debate this afternoon, and what struck me was what I perceived lack of ambition for Hertfordshire and for our residents. So I had lots of things to say, but I decided to actually concentrate on an aspect of that. I think at the heart of the desire for change in Hertfordshire has got to be ambition, that we can improve the lives of residents. To do this, we must be dynamic with our eyes cast to the future to meet the needs of a demographic change. Quite rightly, the figures for the County Council are quoted. For social care, it's gone up 58% during the last decade. Children's social care, 22% since 2019. Temporary housing accommodation by 25% from the same time. Number of young people and children with EHCPs has risen by 25% in the last decade. Given that, I think we cannot doubt the present system is struggling. And whichever unitary model is approved by government, we need to have innovation. It's got to be future-proofed and there's got to be IT transition. I'm speaking now as the executive member for customer experience, which involves IT. And the IT teams of the 11 councils have worked well together to develop a model that they think will work in the future. This is called the 18 Pillars of Tech-Enabled Councils. As its name suggests, there are 18 aspects of IT, licensing, security, data, user support, etc. So they're already starting to look to the future. For instance, our team in North Herts is looking to vesting day, day one, to get a vision of what needs to be working on that day. The work of the 10 boroughs and district councils has been overseen by our North Herts director, Joe Duffy, and our IT manager has had a major part in the subgroup that's been looking at the work. And it is clear that the present county council model cannot simply be updated or split into 2, 3 or 4 parts. Also bear in mind that the assumption that simplicity means that 2 is going to be cheaper than 3 and 3 is going to be cheaper than 4 simply does not work for IT. It actually will be the other way around. Thank you.
Good timing. Councillor Albert.
Thanks, Chair. And as someone who sits both here and at the County Council, I really wanted to spend quite a lot of time in actually, because I've been uncertain, in listening to the debates and in other councils. And I think it's really important to have done that. I've seen, as Councillor Debenham said earlier, it's a real range of opinions across all the parties. I think it was interesting to see that 3 Liberal Democrat-led 3 Rivers actually voted in October, indicatively before the spine paper was even out. In St Albans, the Liberal Democrat Council there have put out a recommendation to their Policy and Strategy Committee even before the full council had discussed it. And they were recommending a 2 unitary option. It must be said there, the Conservatives in St Albans actually supported 4 unitary authorities. The former executive member for resources at County, Bob Deering, Conservative, said it wasn't concerned about the viability of the 4 unitary model. Indeed, he even said that the option would reduce the likelihood of council tax going up. I was interested in East Herts, where Green and Liberal Democrat colleagues overturned the vote of council and voted for 3 unitaries, even though the majority of Liberal Democrat and actually the councillors there, over 50% of them actually supported the 4 unitary option. And I think obviously to pick up Councillor Munson's point, that in Dacorum, and I was talking to Liberal Democrat executive member in Dacorum today, he said the reason why that they supported the 4 unitary option rather than his preference, the 2 unitary option at their cabinet, was that more than 50% of the council there had supported it. As Councillor Debenham pointed out, that is not the case in North Herts. Now, for me, I fully support this principle of establishing unitary authorities. It's the right thing to do. I'll also continue to argue the principle of town council in each area. Localism is important. And whilst I think in looking at what the options in front of us, I agree with Councillor Wright. 2 huge councils, for me, 2 unitaries is just too big. 3 unitary authorities is a bit like the last sweet in the tin. It's a compromise. It delivers unequal sized populations. I don't believe it's the right option. Albeit, it must be said, Conservatives and Liberal Democrats in Welwyn Hatfield did support that option. On the 4 unitary option, I believe a smaller council will be more responsive. It will deliver that A1 corridor and garden cities and towns, can be more agile. But I do have reservations about Arbury and indeed Weston and Sandon. That's why I will support that amendment about Arbury. But I think actually if we get it right and looking at fair funding, at business rate growth, the impact of housing revenue accounts, I actually think that whilst finance is extremely important, it's one of 6 criteria. And that's why I think on balance, we should support the 4 unitary option. It can deliver that balance of accountability alongside financial sustainability for residents.
Thank you very much, Councillor Albert. Councillor Amy Allen.
Thank you, Chair. I've personally been to meetings, area forums over the past few months. We've heard from residents all about LGR. One thing has been absolutely clear: when people take the time to speak, they expect to be listened to. The voices we did receive were thoughtful, passionate, and deeply rooted in local identity. It is frankly astonishing that some councillors have tried to dismiss these views when I referred to the public survey and the fact that the public responded with a preference for 4, simply because not enough people responded, or that the majority for 4 was very small. Now, not going to quite go into quoting Orwell from Animal Farm when I state about how claims of more equal than others, but it's pretty close. Local democracy isn't about counting silence, it's about respecting the people who do speak up. I'm looking at someone right now who does. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Williams.
So I want to begin by expressing sincere thanks to the officers and to Daniel and Val for their extraordinary efforts in getting us to this point. Managing the process while keeping the essential services running is no small feat, and your dedication deserves our recognition. We stand at a crossroads that demands more than individual effort. It demands genuine collaboration, and it is remarkable that all 11 Hertfordshire authorities, each with distinct remits, histories and political perspectives, have come together to develop a single joint proposal. We've heard tonight that that's a unique achievement. Everyone involved in Hertfordshire should be commended. We've been presented with extensive facts, figures and rigorous analysis. We've had reconfirmed tonight that all 11 authorities agree that all 3 options before us are viable and offer real benefits to residents. Every option is based on workable population sizes and coherent geographies, noting the necessary tweaks and the Boundary Commission, and I'll be supporting the amendment for Arbury. Every option is economically viable and delivers financial savings, but the guidance from government is clear. Finance is only one of the 6 key criteria. While financial sustainability matters, and we must take it seriously, our job is not simply to balance spreadsheets. The job that we have been given is to provide a new vision for the next generation of local government in Hertfordshire, an opportunity to redesign the services around the real lives of our communities to meet their needs and aspirations for decades to come. The accountability to recommend a preferred option for North Herts rests with us, the sitting cabinet. But we are not taking this decision in isolation. We have listened to our residents in public meetings, in surveys, in one-to-one engagement, and we're really grateful for all of that input. We've listened to the views of our fellow elected representatives. We have listened to strategic partners and stakeholders throughout the district and beyond. Now, with all of that feedback before us, we have the responsibility to make a recommendation to the Minister. In just 2.5 years, this district will give way to something new, a unitary authority that builds on our strengths, those of our current neighbours, and carries the idea of a county of opportunity forward into the next 50 years. Most importantly, the residents of North Herts have made their preference clear. They favour the 4 unitary option, and I agree with them. While every option widens the geographical area of the authority, the 4 model retains the best connection between representation and residents. And colleagues, we know that good engagement at local level helps us make better decisions with our communities. By selecting the 4 model, we are choosing a future that prioritises place-based leadership, empowered communities, and prevention-focused public services that can address issues upstream rather than at crisis point. The recommendation that we make today is not the end of the journey, it's the beginning. Whatever the Minister ultimately decides for Hertfordshire, and as we've discussed in discussion tonight, this is not the end either, but a continuation of the journey. We must all commit ourselves to working together to ensure a successful transition. That is our collective duty to our residents, and that will be our legacy. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to speak now. I want to focus on the substance of the choice before us. and the positive vision that a full unitary Hertfordshire offers. The full unitary stands out. It creates local authorities that are genuinely local, that are aligned with real communities, real travel patterns, and real economic and social links. And in response to the feedback raised last week, I believe we should consider the amendment that places Arbury Ward in Central Hearts. It shows we've listened and we're willing to shape the model based on what residents have actually told us. On finances, I want to echo the point that was made so clearly by Councillor Pupula-Singham of Full Council. These are projected estimates with a wide range of uncertainty. To use loaded terms like economic illiteracy or financial mismanagement wildly misrepresents the expert, diligent work of our officers across Hertfordshire. We've been presented with projections, not fixed numbers, and they're modelled of the scale that always carries uncertainty. The question's not whether an exact number is right to the pound, it's which model gives us the best long-term stability, flexibility, and fairness for residents. On staffing, I also want to support Councillor Wright's remarks. We're not in the business of cutting jobs for the sake of cuts. Our public servants are the backbone of local government, a structure that forces deep bases. To destabilise these is not just threatening livelihoods, but the very integrity of how we run our councils. Falling unitary model gives us the space to project knowledge, retain experience, and build motivated, effective teams. This is unquestionably a difficult decision. Every option carries opportunity. Every option carries risk. There is no single correct answer here, no perfect exam script. What we're doing tonight is balancing the risks in good faith, and we're choosing what we believe will best serve residents for decades to come. This is why it's important this debate happens across the whole county, openly and constructively. I also want to pick up on something other councillors have said. Whichever structure we choose, it will only succeed because of the people that work within it. Our job is to create the platform for their success. Stable, local, representative, bodies that match the communities they serve, and the full unitary model does that. I've suggested the side letter from NHDC to the Secretary of State, and I'm glad that we've all seen that that works well. I want to speak to you now, my fellow Cabinet members. Your vote is your own. I've heard your perspectives, your concerns and your reasoning, and the officers have guided us and given us support, and I thank them for that all across Hertfordshire. You should speak and vote without fear or pressure from any political group or individual. Leadership is not about bending to threats. It's about making the right decisions for the people that put us here. And tonight, I believe that decision is the full unitary model. Fairer representation, stronger local identity, better long-term resilience, and a structure built around the communities we are all here to serve. And with that, we are going to move on to the votes. Vote 2.1 will be done through the electronic system. We are voting on the note the content of the report, the draft Hertfordshire submission document at Appendix A to E, which forms the proposed collective submission to government on local government reorganisation and the indicative non-binding view of full council at its meeting on the 13th of November 2025. May we vote on that using our buttons, please?
Chair, that motion is carried.
Thank you. The vote on 2.2 will be done through roll call. Susan will conduct the roll call for us and then announce the outcome.
When I call your name, which will be in alphabetical order of surname, please indicate your vote for option A, 2 unitary, option B, 3 unitary, option C, 4 unitary, or option D for no preference. Start with Ian Alburn.
Thanks, and I will be voting after careful consideration for option C.
Councillor Amy Allen.
C.
Councillor Daniel Allen,
Option C.
Councillor Val Bryant,
Option C.
Councillor Mick Debenham,
Vote for option C.
Councillor Laura Williams,
Option C.
and Councillor Donna Wright.
Option C.
Chair, 7 votes for option C.
Thank you very much. The next vote again will be done by our buttons. It is 2.3 to delegate authority to the Chief Executive and Leader of the Council to agree to any final minor amendments to the Hertfordshire submission document prior to submission to Government by the 28th of November 2025. Can we vote, please?
Chair, that motion is carried.
Thank you. And 2.4 is my amendment that the Chief Executive, in consultation with the Leader of the Council, be authorised to finalise the form of wording for a side letter to be submitted to MHCLG to accompany the Council's formal submission, that the letter shall set out the outcome of the full Council deliberations and the concerns raised by members regarding the proposed placement of the Arbury ward within alternative unitary configurations and the need for MHCLG to give this matter full consideration as part of the reorganisation process, that the finalised submission be issued by the Leader on behalf of the Council. That will also be voted by button.
Chair, that motion is carried.
Thank you. Right, we now move on to item 12, exclusion of the press and public. I propose that under section 100A of the Local Government Act 1972, the press and public be excluded from the meeting on the grounds the following report will involve the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in paragraph 3 of part 1 of schedule 12A of the said act as amended. May I have a seconder, please? Councillor Debenham. Thank you. May we go to the vote, please?
Chair, that motion is carried.
Thank you. We'll now move through into part 2. a moment. So. Thank you. I now close the meeting. Our next scheduled meeting is on the 20th of January. And if it's the last time I chair as leader, then so be it. We've made a decision that's bigger than any one person. Thank you.